Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. That's on completely the wrong screen. Let's put that there. That. This. That. Apparently, the clock in my room is wrong. Sorry for the delay. What have we got? What have we got? More Duskmourn, more spoilers. Let's get this show on the road. Good morning. Welcome to Running Commentary. I play the games, I run on the treadmill, I try to entertain you while getting myself some exercise. Having my treadmill collapse under me, apparently. Oh, never mind, we're alive. Tweak that just a little bit. Sorry. Camera's being wonky. Okay, there we go. That's that. It's a new Magic set release week, so it's set review time. Just going to work our way through everything that Duskmourn has to offer. Pick up the pace a little bit. Right. Black cards. Off we go. Appendage Amalgam. Right. Yep. Black. Enchant Appendage Amalgam. 2 and a black for a 3/2 with flash. It's an enchantment creature horror, and whenever it attacks, surveil 1. Medium-sized flash threats are always interesting. Instant speed enchantment triggers can be interesting. Surveil 1 when you attack is not very exciting. If you are looking for just more things to flash in, this isn't horrible, but it's not exciting. If you're looking for instant speed enchantment triggers, again, just run Leyline of Anticipation. It is fine, but not exciting in pretty much any dimension. Onwards. Baelmert Leech. 1 and a black for a 2/2 Leech with Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters and whenever you fully unlock a room, each opponent loses 1 life. Now this is more interesting, giving some sort of win condition for the very heavy enchantment decks. Especially if you can repeatedly reset rooms to unlock them over and over and over again. 1 damage doesn't seem like a lot, but anyone who's played with Conrad or other similar effects knows that 1 damage to each opponent can add up and end a game very quickly. If you expect to see this, expect it to do scary things. Ooh, what was the... There was a blue spell that create rolls. Create why? Roll. Roll. Search. Oh, that's why this isn't working. That's the type line, not the text line. Asinine Antics. That's the one I was trying to remember. You play Baelmert Leech. You cast Asinine Antics. You make a curse roll on each creature your opponent controls, and then ping them for 1 for every creature they control. A nice little 1/2 punch. Onwards. Cackling Slasher. Hello, you disturbingly happy thing. 3 and a black for a 3/3 human assassin with Death Touch, and it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if a creature died this turn. This is a slightly odd card. 4 mana 4/4 is fine, a 4 mana 3/3 is less so. Death Touch on a creature this size isn't enormously exciting. Yes, it lets you trade up, but you're putting quite a few resources into it. And why would you want this instead of just a 1/1 Death Touch? I don't know. I guess it's an assassin if you care about that and need more mediocre assassins, but I think that's about the only thing this card has going for it. Come back wrong. 2 and a black, sorcery. Destroy target creature. If a creature card is put into a graveyard this way, return it to the battlefield under your control. Sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. So, you kill something, it comes back under your control, and then goes away again almost immediately. If you... Sorry, I'm apparently quite tired. Talkie. Right. So, 3 mana sorcery speed removal is not great. 3 mana sorcery speed removal where you get the ETB of whatever you're killing is a lot more interesting. 3 mana sorcery speed removal, if you hit something with haste, you get to attack with it, is also quite interesting. Going to be an amazing include in not this one. This one. Nope. No, it won't. That is not a... I don't think that counts as a trigger. Never mind. Maybe it's a delayed trigger. I'm sorry, I'm not quite awake enough to think about this. Come back wrong. 3 mana. Kill something, get its effects. Very reasonable. Nothing exceptional. Sorcery speed kind of hurts. Let's move on. Commune with evil. 2 and a black. Sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, the rest in your graveyard, you gain 3 life. Okay. 3 mana impulse at sorcery speed is not exciting. Although, you do get to fill your graveyard a bit. If you're in a mono-black graveyard deck and desperately want to fit just more spells that put cards in your graveyard, this isn't the worst version. But this is also not an exceptional card in that form. Part of an interesting thing they're doing with enchantments, where the enchantments are doing multiple different things. Cracked Skull, 2 and a black, enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When Cracked Skull enters, look at target player's hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. And when enchanted creature is dealt damage, destroy it. So, you put it on an opponent's creature, you get to look at an opponent's hand. It doesn't have to be the control of the creature you've enchanted. You can duress not duress. Thoughtseize. Choose a non-land, not a non-creature non. So, put it on your opponent's creature. You take away the best card from their hand, from an opponent's hand, and then when anything hurts the creature that is enchanted, that creature also goes away. Slow removal spell, expensive hand attack. Clunky removal, expensive hand attack, but it is 2 decent spell effects on 1 piece of cardboard. So I expect it will see at least a fringe of play. It's the Cynical Loner. 1 and a black for a 3/1 human survivor. Can't be blocked by Glimmers, which are the 1/1 creature token of the set, and Survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Cynical Loner is tapped, you may search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. So, a 2-mana 3/1 that has trinket text evasion and lets you entomb every turn that it survives. That is a remarkably strong ability for graveyard decks. Getting it to survive when it's a 3/1 may be challenging, but if you get to do that even once in something like Merrin, you are setting yourself up for some incredibly strong effects. If you can get her out early, if your opponent plays this early, prioritize getting her off the board or getting creatures out to defend, because if she gets to attack safely, you may be in trouble very quickly. The Dashing Bloodsucker. 3 and a black for a 2/5 vampire warrior. Okay. Why is a warrior a 2/5? That is a lot of toughness and not a lot of attack. But he also has Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, Dashing Bloodsucker gets +2/+0 and gains lifelink until the end of turn. Multiple instances of lifelink don't stack, but you can keep adding the +2/+0s. So, this 4-mana 2/5 has the potential to very easily turn into a 6/5, 8/5 lifelink. Not the most exciting card, but a decent attacker in a heavy enchantment deck, or a black including Voltron style. That was not what I wanted to do. That one. That one. That one. Defiled Crypt. 3 and a black. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, make a 2/2 black horror enchantment creature token only once each turn. And Cadaver Lab. Single black. When you unlock this door, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm honestly not entirely clear on the logic of how they decide which sequence they put things. Like, I think everything we've seen so far has had the cheaper half on the left and the more expensive on the right. And now we have this. If it was alphabetical, I could understand, but I don't know. I'm sure there must be some sort of logic, but I guess they think this makes more sense with the story the card is telling. But I don't know that it's the most, or yeah, I don't know. Not the most coherent structurally. Like, the actual story it's telling is great, and the actual abilities on this card are strong. we've seen this sort of get extra value from emptying your graveyard effect before. Limited to only once a turn is quite disappointing, but is probably a rather necessary restrictor to stop you just doing some real massive nonsense with something. Land recursion is probably the most obvious place to look, but mostly you're just going to play this for the 4-mana side, set up for an endless form of 2/2s, and then you've just got the second room when you need it, if you need one more trigger or to rebuy a particularly important card. Oh look, Demonic Council. 1 and a black for a sorcery. Search your library for a demon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Delirium. If there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, instead search your library for any card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. I guess I should make sure Delirium is clear. Delirium cares about 4 or more card types, not cards. If you've got 3 creatures and a land in your graveyard, you have 2 types. If you have an artifact creature and an enchantment land, you have 4 types. That makes sense? Great. So, 2 mana, search for a demon. If you have 4 card types in your graveyard, you get to search for any land. You get to search for any card, put it into your hand. Demonic Tutor remains one of the most powerful Magic cards ever printed. Demonic Tutor, with a very minor restriction on when you can use it, will remain one of the more powerful cards we have seen in Magic in a long time. If you want copies of this, get them fast. I expect this to become quite expensive. This I think is one of the riskier cards Wizards have printed in quite a while, which is a kind of ridiculous thing to say, given some of the things we've seen in recent Magic, but maybe they're just gambling that Magic has become so fast that taking a turn off to tutor isn't good enough in the primary formats that like standard and modern. I don't know that I am convinced by that argument. If your opponent is running this card, be afraid they are not doing fair things with it. Derelict Attic. When you unlock this door, you draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. 3 mana, draw 2, lose 2. Very standard, very normal. Not very exciting, but still gets played. Slightly above the rate of something like Night's Whisper, but the fact that it's on a room means you might be able to recur it, means it may be worth the value. And Widow's Walk. 3 and a black. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. Expensive, but being able to safely get attacks in when your opponent might otherwise be able to stall you out is valuable. There are often board states where you want to be able to attack and force your opponent to trade off something, and this lets you do that every turn as long as you have resources. I think the strangest thing about this card is how little most of the rooms we've seen have some sort of synergy between the 2 sides. This really does not. And it's honestly a rather depressing concept. But the effects are both slightly overcosted but reasonable. The fact that you've got two of them on one card means it remains playable. I will probably be considering it if I build the Rooms deck. Our good friend, the ultimate meme. To understand this card, we first must understand some old Magic history. Doomsday. Doomsday remains one of the most powerful cards in Magic, a staple of eternal formats, and one of the hardest decks to play according to those that play it. Doomsday, for 3 black, sorcery, search your library and graveyard for 5 cards, exile everything else, put the chosen cards in your library in any order, lose half your life. So, you go down to 5 cards of your choice and you try and stack your deck, stack those 5 cards in order to set up a win. So, now we know what original Doomsday is, let's look at the Doomsday Excruciator. Doomsday Excruciator is black, 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 black for a 6/6 flying demon. When it enters, if it was cast, each player exiles all but the bottom 6 cards of their library face down. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. So, we have the same sort of exile everything but a small sliver of your library. We do, and also get rid of all of your opponents. The downside, we have no control over what we have left unless we have already scried or otherwise manipulated our library. The plus side, we have a 6/6 flyer to whack our opponents with. The downside, our good friend the Doomsday Excruciator is forcing us to draw extra cards, so we are at great risk of decking ourselves before our opponents do. This is a demon in a long line of weird demons, wizards, prints that go, someone is going to lose the game real fast, I don't care if it's you or me. A 6/6 flyer will kill an opponent quickly. 6 cards in your library and drawing 2 cards a turn will kill you quickly. I think if this sees play at all, the most likely place for it to see play is in a mill deck, where you exile everyone's libraries down to 6 cards, and then you just mill your opponents out before it gets round to you. 6 black mana is very difficult to cast. I guess that's the other place it might see play, in devotion combo decks, where once you've got all of the pieces you need on the battlefield and no longer really care about your library, you can just exile everything. I guess food chain combos as well, where things like Squee, Mist Hollow Griffin, you can cast from exile, so you get food chain, you Doomsday, you clear out all your library to almost guarantee that you hit the cards that you need, and then you just combo from there. I don't know. It's a very interesting piece. Almost certainly someone will find a way to break it. I feel like 6/6 flying is playing it rather safer than I would like. If this had Trample or Menace, I would be rather happier about it, because that makes it better at actually killing. Fascinating and bizarre, pretty cool art, ridiculous mana cost. If your opponent plays this fairly, have a great time, it's hilarious. If your opponent is playing it unfairly, which I expect they are, then panic. Onwards. The black card in the Enduring cycle, Enduring Tenacity. 2 black for a 4/3, enchantment creature, Snake Glimmer. Greetings, Necrotic Identity. Welcome to my strange little corner of the internet. Oh. Ah yes. Wizards continuing to provide more support for the 2-card Infinite, Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Hello, Sanguine Bond number 4? Number 5? Nope, we've done white cards, we've done blue cards. Multicolored is going to be probably Friday. They will be black and red. Friday will be green, multicolored, and hopefully artifacts and lands, depending on if I can keep walking and talking long enough to get through them all. Otherwise, next Monday, I will finish off with whatever I've not done and the cards from the Commander exclusive sets. Commander exclusive cards, that's the one. I have seen several interesting ideas about Nico. I have not really looked into it yet because I kind of enjoy coming at the spoilers at least a little bit fresh. Right. If you want to share those thoughts with me, please do come back for Friday, and I will be fascinated to see if your thoughts line up with what I have to say about him when I read through the card properly. There, Nico is them. Enduring Tenacity. 2 black, 4/3, Enchantment Snake Glimmer. This one is the Sanguine Bond, right? Yeah. Whenever you gain life, target opponent. Yeah. We still have not yet had Wizards give us another Exquisite Blood, which means that we continue to have 4 or 5 versions of this effect and only one of the other half. I don't know if this is a good or bad sign for how Wizards view such things. Right. And then it has the same line of text we see on the other Enduring cards. When this dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment. If you're playing a life gain deck with black in, you want this card. You are probably playing the others. This is a pretty major upgrade over several of the versions we've already seen. I think this is the second cheapest. I think Veto still outpips it, but a 4-mana 4/3 is respectable. The fact that your opponent has to get rid of this twice is a pretty significant line of text. And if you're doing the life gain thing, you know how powerful Sanguine Bond is. That's about all there is to say on this card. If you're not doing life gain stuff, you don't really care. If you are doing life gain stuff, you are desperate for it. Onwards. Fanatic of the Harrowing. 3 and a black for a 2/2 human cleric. Not the most exciting stats, but let's see what the rules text has for us. When Fanatic of the Harrowing enters, each player discards a card. If you discarded a card this way, draw a card. That is... So, this is not the text we've seen on a few cards recently where your opponents discard, and if they fail to, or discard a card with certain characteristics, you get to draw a card. This is everyone discards, including me, and then when I discard, I get to replace it, whereas everyone else ends up down a card. Interesting if you can loop it, but odd. Loop it, clear your opponent's hands, you end up with the same number of cards. Loop it just to dig through your deck while reducing your opponent's ability to interact. 4 mana feels relatively expensive for this, but it's certainly an interesting and definitely a unique effect. Valgavoth wants our pain, our terror. We cannot join him unless we suffer. I will say some of the black cards in this set are cool and others look busted. I think a lot of the cards in this set look cool. Several are indeed quite busted. Honestly, I was not excited for this set when they first announced the horror set, and I do not get a lot of the horror tropes. That's really not my thing. But some of the world building that's gone into it is really fascinating, and some of the concepts I have really enjoyed reading the MTG story. Anyway, let us look at the Fear of Lost Teeth. Single black for a 1/1 enchantment creature nightmare. When Fear of Lost Teeth dies, it deals 1 damage to any target and you gain 1 life. 1 damage to any target instead of an opponent losing a life is a pretty significant upgrade in terms of rules text. A 1 mana enchantment is valuable just for triggering a pile of area and constellation effects. I think this card, like, if you can set up loops with this thing, if you're doing stuff with someone like Shire or Lurrus, where you can just loop this over and over, you can get a lot of value out of this creepy little card. Don't underestimate it just because it's a 1 mana 1/1 common. This card has a lot going for it. As it drew closer, Sam felt her own teeth wriggle in their sockets, as if they wanted to leap out and join the thing. There. No, thank you. Fear of the Dark. 4 and a black for a 5/5 enchant creature nightmare. Whenever Fear of the Dark attacks, if defending player controls no glimmer creatures, it gains Menace and Death Touch until end of turn. Okay, so we have a 5 mana 5/5 conditionally Menace and Death Touch. Menace and Death Touch are a powerful pairing. A 5 mana 5/5 isn't incredible, but also nothing to be ashamed of. And outside of limited, Glimmer's going to be rare and unusual enough that this is going to pretty safely attack as a Menace Death Touch. If you want to really make your opponents struggle with blocks, this is a good card for it. Final Vengeance. A single black mana for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature or enchantment and exile target creature. A single black mana exile is very powerful. Sacrificing a creature or enchantment gives you quite a lot of versatility. Mono black decks, I think, are going to very like this card. Sorcery speed does hurt, but this is one of the cheapest unconditional removal spells that exile we have seen outside of white. Expect to have a lot of your big things finally vengeance. I expect to see this card at a lot of tables. Oh, where's the stop button? There we go. Funeral Room. 2 and a black. Room. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So, we have Blood Artist on an enchantment. Excellent. Love that. Awakening Hall. 6 black. When you unlock this door, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. We have Mass Reanimation. Excellent. Love that. 8 mana is a lot. And we have to compare it with things like Rise of the Dark Realms. Which is 1 more mana for all creatures from all graveyards. But there are 2 countervailing points I want to make in favour of Awakening Hall. 1, you can play this for 3 mana and get a series of effects out of it before you generate the mana for the second effect. 2, if you are playing this, you are a deck that is filling your graveyard anyway, and this, all you want to do then is get back all of your own value and just crush your opponents with Funeral Room by sacrificing everything all over again. And if you've got ways to loot the Awakening Hall by, for example, sacrificing this, getting it back to hand with Eternal Witness, recasting it, you can repeatedly use the unlock this door. And sure, Eternal Witness can pick up Rise of the Dark Realms as well, but there are more Eternal Witness effects that get back permanence than there are in Blackers related colours, especially. Is that true actually? Because there's quite a few blue-black cards that will pick up instants and sorceries. So maybe that isn't as strong an argument as I think I'm making. But nevertheless, if you're the sort of deck that likes Rise of the Dark Realms and likes Blood Artists, this is an amazing card. If you see it on your opponent's side of the table, be afraid. I think a lot of people are going to need to be... Sun Titan ETB. I'm not sure that it can, because I believe that when in any zone other than play, this counts as the full cost of everything. Let me quickly find the release notes. Overshoot. Yes. Release notes. Rooms. Class of rooms have two facing characteristics. Each room has a single card for you've discarded one. Each room has two names. Okay, no, never mind. So, yes, you can get back Funeral Room, but it is worth noting that when you can get back Funeral Room with Sun Titan, I believe. Oh no, that's the one I've just needed to read the next one on. Okay, when not on the stack or the battlefield, its characteristics are a combination of both doors. So this one would be 8 and triple black in your graveyard. You cannot get it with Sun Titan, and even if you could, because of the way rooms work, if you didn't cast it, it would enter with no doors unlocked. So you'd have to get it back and then spend the mana to open it. If it entered from anywhere other than the stack, it will enter with both halves locked. Right. Any further questions about that before I move on? Good question. Look, I think rooms, once people have played with them for a bit, it will become fairly understood how they work, but initially at least, they are complicated and somewhat unintuitive. Yeah. I expect a lot of people are going to be trying out a lot of rooms in Commander over the next few months. I recommend that people start packing a bit more enchantment hate into their decks. Yep, I agree. People are going to misplay with rooms a lot and try and do a lot of things that the rules do not actually allow. I encourage people to skim through at least the release notes section of the room section in the release notes. They explain a lot of the things that people care about in enough detail to understand them without being an enormous essay on the subject. But for now, onwards. Yeah, I can give you a link to the release notes. Not a problem. But then I think rooms, believe, were the first section that get talked about. So just scroll down until you see new enchantment type room and read from there. Okay. Give in to violence. 1 and a black for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink until end of turn. Welcome to Magic. One, in my opinion, the greatest card game made. I have inherent bias. I've been playing this game since like 2001. I've invested huge amounts of time and money into this hobby, but it keeps me entertained, it keeps me interested, it is constantly changing and innovating. Come, strip yourself of flesh and fear, hunt for me, entertain me, the Lord of Pain. Well, that is a creepy guy. Give into violence, 1 in the black, instant, target creature gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink. Not bad, not amazing. If you're looking for big life gains, this is pretty reasonable, but 2 mana for +2/+2 isn't the most exciting rate, especially if you have access to colours other than black. Basically, the only time you'll want this, is if you've got a deck that reliably is. I guess that's the sort of place you'd want this, is something like Brick. Admittedly, he has lifelink himself, but something where you're using your life as a resource and want the way to make really big life swings to get back into it. £90 Magic will arrive this week. I am holding off on making any purchases for the time being until after Duskmourn's been out for a couple of weeks and the price settled. Family Matters Recon. Icon. Is that the Rabbits one with? I can never remember the names of the Recons. No, it's the bird. Sure, that makes sense. Yes, because he gives everything offspring. Of course. Yeah, scary guy. I've seen a couple of people in my regular play group. A couple of people in my regular play group play that in various ways, and when it goes off, it is a terrifying commander. When are you going? Just take him to the go this weekend. Take him to a pre-release. Get him to. I am pre-release in 2 days. I am excited. I love pre-release events. Grievous Wound. 3 black. Enchant Aura, enchant player. Enchanted player can't gain life. Whenever enchanted player is dealt damage, they lose half their life rounded up. Poke is old and you want to give him a new interest so he does not watch brain rot content on YouTube. All you're going to do is change the brain rot content on YouTube. Have you seen some of the nonsense that Magic creators get up to on the internet? I say, I am a Magic content creator on the internet. Most of my content does. I say I'm a Magic content. I'm a variety guy. This week will be all Magic because I want to work through the entire set, but generally I do Magic on Mondays, Well-worn Wednesdays. On my Well-worn Wednesdays, I take a game and I just play it until I have decided I am exhausted of it, have built and completed all of the potential that entertainment it has for me. And then Fridays are my first time Fridays, where I play a game I've not really played before and just play it for a couple of months of Fridays to see how I feel about it and decide if I want to spend more time on it. That's fair. Places I'd point him to are Tolarian Community College is a great starting place for understanding more about Magic. For actual Magic content, the Magic card market guys are some of the most entertaining and accessible. The loading ready run stuff is pretty easy. Trying to think. Not sure of it. Not really aware of anyone with content particularly aimed at introductory level Magic, unfortunately. But if you're trying to get him into Commander, then something like Commander Clash or the SCG Commander team. Hey, commentary wife. Good morning. Look, it's a card that you're probably going to be like, ooh, I'm excited about, until I point out that the decks you would run this in have no creatures in, so you're never actually going to get this last bit of it. We were talking about YouTube mind rot, not ways to play, but ways to watch it, Magic getting played. Let's talk about Grievous Wound. 3 black, enchantment aura, enchant player. Enchanted player can't gain life. Whenever enchanted player is dealt damage, they lose half their life rounded up. Okay. Some things to talk about with this. One, despite it feeling like it ought to be a curse, it isn't. We can just skip over that, because no one really cares. The people who care about curses are ridiculously niche. Enchanted player can't gain life. Can be useful, but is rather restrictive in Commander, where you've got multiple opponents. You can only lock down one of them. This sort of effect I'm always cautious about, because you play it on one opponent and you basically declare that I am now that player's enemy for the rest of the game. It makes politics more difficult. Whenever enchanted player is dealt damage, they lose half their life rounded up. Great. You get in with a 1/1 unblockable, you knock them, chunk them for half their life. The first couple of times it makes a pretty big difference. After that it's pretty negligible. It's important to note that all combat damage happens at the same time, so if you hit them with 3 creatures, you will only half their life for once. But if you have something with double strike, you will half it and then half it again. Also important to note, the damage will happen first, so if your opponent's on 40, you hit them with a 1/1, they will take 1 damage, go down to 39, then half their life total. Is that all the key things to say with this? Interesting card. If you enjoy playing really political games and making enemies, this isn't the worst card you could play. It certainly encourages your opponents to attack the person who's been grievously wounded, because their attackers will have additional value strapped to them. I'm not a huge fan of this sort of card in Commander, just because it restricts options in various ways. And just more art from the same card. Innocuous Rat. In a long line of 2-mana 1/1s that when they die give you something afterwards. Yes, I had not mentioned that I was in the program. Had the thought to mention that I'd get onto YouTube eventually, and then got sidetracked with a different thought. I was going to mention that all this goes to YouTube, but then started talking about the fact that I am not only a Magic content creator instead. Thank you for making sure that that got mentioned, dear commentary wife. I will try to remember that little younglings may start watching. Right. Innocuous Rat. 1 and a black for a 1/1. When it dies, manifest dread. This is a lot of value for a 2-mana common. Manifest dread. Just to go over it again, you look at the top 2 cards of your library. One of them goes into play face down as a 2/2 creature. If the card is a creature on the front side, you can pay its mana cost to turn it face up at any time. The second card that you didn't put into play goes into your graveyard. Remember, putting things in your graveyard is an advantage, not a downside. Think of all the things we've seen that care about cards in your graveyard. Putting more cards there means more value for you later. A 2-mana 1/1 that your opponents don't want to kill is always great because there's always something fun you can do with that. Threaten attacks. Just sacrifice it to other effects like that removal spell we were talking about earlier, whose name I have completely forgotten. Great sack outlet, replaces itself with another body for you to sack outlet. Love this card. Creepy face. Looks kind of like the mask I made when I was at school, actually. I don't think that mask was meant to be a horror mask. I can't remember why it came out so hideous. Papier-mâché can be like that, right? Killer's Mask. 2 and a black artifact equipment. When it enters, manifest dread. Then attach Killer's Mask to that creature. The equipped creature has menace and equipped for 2. No worries. I am not one to comment on the quality of people's lives. When I'm not doing this, my work life is spent working with people who need help and trying to get it for them. I have seen all manner of troubled people. So, Killer's Mask. 3 mana, manifest dread, give it menace. In blue, we saw this, which gave flying instead. Equip 2 is much more reasonable than Equip 3. Menace is often pretty equivalent to flying in terms of its use. This card is fine. If you're looking to manifest dread reliably, this will do it. Black is worse for blinking permanents than blue is, so that is a downside compared to the Windbreaker, but a perfectly reasonable thing just to get some more pieces of paper onto the battlefield. Let's play a game. Three and a black. Sorcery. Choose one or Delirium. If there are 4 or more card types among cards in a graveyard, choose 1 or more instead. So, you can choose one of creatures all your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn, or each opponent discards 2 cards, or each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. But if you have 4 or more card types, your card type being creature, enchantment, instant, sorcery, artifact, planeswalker, battle, kindred. I'm missing one. Can't remember what I'm missing. So if you have at least 4 of those in your graveyard, you can choose any number of these effects. 4 mana to make each opponent discard 2 is already a very reasonable magic card that would see play. 4 mana to make your opponents discard 2, drain them a chunk, and kill all of their 1/1s is a really powerful effect. If you can reliably hit Delirium, you probably want to include this card. It has a lot of upside. If you're in a heavy discard deck, this card is probably still worth considering just for the choose 1, each opponent discards 2 cards. Land, thank you. How did I miss lands? I know. Oh no. Oh, the indignity. Oh, the humiliation. Woe is me. Anyway. If you're only reliably getting 1, the creatures your opponent control get -1/-1 until end of turn is rarely relevant. Each opponent loses 3, you gain 3 is not a particularly powerful effect, so it's play this for the discard or play this because you reliably have Delirium. Do you guys plan to do long form video? Don't mind the interview. Not really. Like, the main purpose of all of this is when I only stream when I'm using the treadmill. If I stream, then I have to have a schedule. People expect me to stick to the schedule. So I have to be on the treadmill at least 3 times a week. This means I get exercise 3 times a week. Hooray, hooray, fitness. Like, the whole streaming human interaction thing is just a spin-off side effect of me trying to find a way to force myself to get regular exercise in my life. Can't be too much Yu-Gi-Oh! I never have. I think I've played like 3 games of Yu-Gi-Oh! In my entire existence. Delirium's honestly not hard to get. Yep, but it depends on how you build your deck. Like, I have got decks where it can be a legitimate challenge to get Delirium because I am so heavily focused on just having just one card type. Like, one of my decks is, I think, 37 lands and 52 creatures, and then a couple of other things filling out the last few spots. Like, getting Delirium there is very difficult. And then I've got other decks where Delirium is so easy that I barely think about it. It's just... I am not saying that this card should be avoided. I'm just saying make sure you know that you're reliably going to Delirium before you do it. Not that Delirium is hard, but just that it does need thinking about. It will not always be available, unlike other cards that might have similar effects. Leyline of the Void. Wizards, please, please, can we have a new black Leyline? I get that you love Leyline of the Void. I get that it's a really important safety valve for standard formats. But please! Leyline of the Void. 2 black enchantment. If it's in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. If a card be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. We have seen Leyline of the Void 4 or 5 or 7 or 20 times now. There's not a lot to say about it that hasn't already been said. If you're new to Magic, hi, this is one of the most effective ways to shut down your opponent's graveyard without hurting your own. If you care about that, look to pick up a copy. If you play graveyard decks, make sure you have a plan for dealing with your opponents having one of these in play that doesn't require you to utilize your graveyard. Live or die. I think it's the only black line because they can't think of anything else to give to black. No, that is. There are so many effects that we have seen them give black. Like Leyline of Suffering. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Leyline of Wasting. All creatures have -1/-1. Sure. See you later, wifey. Leyline of Power. Beginning of your upkeep. Pay 2 life, draw a card. There are so many powerful effects that black has been given that they could put on a Leyline that would be strong but not broken. Live or die, 3 black, choose instant, choose 1, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield or destroy target creature. I agree that 5 mana instant destroy target creature is overcosted. 5 mana instant reanimate is not. If you are playing this card, you are playing it because you want to surprise your opponent by returning the best thing in your graveyard in the middle of combat, getting its enters effects and blocking. If this said tapped, this would be an incredibly safe card. I would not recommend playing it. This does not require your thing to enter tapped. This does not give it finality counters. This has none of the restrictions we often see on instant speed reanimation. 5 is still expensive, but instant speed makes up for that. If you're playing this because you want to destroy creatures with it, this is bad. Play murder. I grant them the illusion of hope, so that their despair grows ever sweeter, says Valgaboth. Meat Hook Massacre 2! XX, black, 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 legendary enchantment. When Meat Hook Massacre 2 enters, each opponent sacrifices X creatures. Whenever a creature you control dies, you may pay 3 life. If you do, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they may pay 3 life. If they don't, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. Is this the only instant reanimate? No. Sorry, let's jump back so we can finish talking about this then. Type. Instant. Text. Creature. Graveyard. Battlefield. We have Back for More. We have Betrayal of Flesh. We have Black Sun's Twilight. We have Fated Return. Deadly Plot is only a zombie. We can ignore that. Goryo's Vengeance. Grave Endeavor is a commander card. Grim Return has restrictions on it. It doesn't add up, was in Murders of Karlov Manor, but suspected it so you can't block. There is a long history of instant speed rescue from the underworld, has to sacrifice something but brings back multiple things. It is not a unique effect, but it is not a common one. And having alternative value to it, even overcosted, is quite a nice addition. Went the wrong way. Come on, there we go. Meat Hook Massacre 2. So, for 6 mana, each player sacrifices 1 creature. Then, you can pay 3 life to get it back, and your opponent can pay 3 life to stop you getting it back. I think if you're playing this, you are much more often going to be playing it without putting anything into X, just playing 4 mana, and then going to combat and making your opponent make really difficult choices. If you're playing a Cabal Coffer's really big mana deck, then sure, go ahead, put 8 mana into the X's, make everyone sacrifice 4 creatures, but I would not be surprised to see this far more often just sit on the battlefield and threaten rather than actually force things to go away. Baffling card. Great in mono-black devotion style decks. 4 pips and powerful effects. What's that? No, wrong one. Okay. What's a card that I'm thinking of? To put target into there. Sorry, brain is currently blanking on me and I can't think of who it. There's a card that I'm thinking of that lets you remove counters from your things during your upkeep. I think it's... Something like Edge Slip, where you can just keep removing the finality counters. Feign, yeah, there's a great place for Meathook Massacre 2. Feign the Broker. Remove the finality counters, make treasure tokens. Doesn't that sound like a good time? Meathook Massacre 2 with Thief of Blood. Yep, same concept. It is worth noting that for each creature you get a separate trigger, so you need to carefully stack the triggers to make sure that Thief of Blood is the last one that comes in. But yeah, Thief of Blood would definitely work as well. Right. Meathook Massacre 2. Big old scary card. I think, honestly, less scary than the original Meathook Massacre, but that's because this works much worse as a board wipe, and is mostly going to be a grinding value engine, rather than Meathook's board wipe massive life swings. The Miasma Demon. 4 black for a 5/4 flying. When it enters, discard any number of cards. When you do, up to that many target creatures each get -2/-2. Hush, little ants. I can rid you of your troubles with a breath. All I ask in return is a drop of blood and a promise. So, you play this. You ditch a pile of lands that you've randomly held and not bothered playing. You shrink a pile of things. You cannot stack these, so you would need to pick a different creature for each -2/-2. So you're just going to clear out a load of small things, or play it after combat to finish off something. How many cards you're going to have in hand when you're playing a 6-drop is questionable, but it's an interesting effect and a great way to fill your graveyard if that's what you're into, and a great way to clear off a lot of small annoying things that your opponents have been protecting. Murder! 1 black, destroy target creature. Razorkin have only one hobby. We've seen murder before, it still remains a very reasonable removal spell. It's worse than the ones that let you kill creatures or planeswalkers, but it's absolutely fine to still be playing this. Nowhere to run. 1 and a black, enchantment, flash. When it enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-3 until end of turn, and creatures your opponents control can be the targets of spells and abilities as though they didn't have hexproof, and ward abilities if those creatures don't trigger. So, it's a 2-mana enchantment that shuts off hexproof and ward and kills something. That is a fascinating effect, remarkably powerful. Don't underestimate how much your opponents will appreciate you shutting off ward. One of them... That's true. Wizards are still trying to work out how to balance ward, and it isn't going great. Nowhere to Run is a new way for them to explore the limits of it, and I very like it. 2 mana to give something -3/-3 is a very reasonable removal spell, especially with flash, and this just sits around on the battlefield and permanently restricts all of your opponent's protection spells. It's important to note that this doesn't remove hexproof and ward, so your opponent can't get around it by then giving it to them again. This just makes it so that they don't work. Osseous Stick Twister. 1 and a black for a 2/2 lifelink. Fine. Delirium. At the beginning of your end step, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, each opponent may sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. Then, whilst your Stick Twister deals damage equal to its power to each opponent who didn't sacrifice a permanent or discard a card. This is a heck of a lot of value for 2 mana. It will take you a bit of time to fill your graveyard up, but you can just chip in with your 2/2 lifelink. You really want this in a deck where you can put a pile of extra power on it to make your opponents really have to consider. But it's also worth noting that Stick Twister is the one dealing the damage, so every opponent who isn't sacrificing is also gaining you additional life. I feel like I want this in a deck somewhere. I'm not sure which decks I've got would work with it, but there's enough going on there to make me quite interested in pulling it off. Overlord of the Balemerc. 3 black for a Avatar Horror 5/5 with Impending 2. Impending is, if you cast it for the impending cost, it enters with that many time counters and isn't a creature until the time counters are removed. And at the beginning of your end step, remove a time counter. Still weird that this happens in the end step, but oh well. And whenever it enters or attacks, mill 4 cards, then return a non-avatar creature card or a planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. So, 2 mana, mill 4, return a creature or planeswalker to your hand. Doesn't have to be one of the ones milled, just anything sitting in your graveyard. And then, whenever it attacks, you get the same effect. 2 mana is the cheapest impending we've seen. Impending 5 is the longest impending we've seen. A 5 mana 5/5 with no evasion that just puts cards into your hand and fills your graveyard is rather underwhelming compared to some of its siblings. 5 mana 5/5 enters mill 4, rebuy something. It is fine, but does not excite me in any meaningful way. Good for filling graveyards. Whether I don't know that it's better than other things you can do at the same mana value. Popular Egotist. 2 and a black for a 3/2 human rogue. 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature or enchantment. Popular Egotist gains indestructible until end of turn and tap it. Whenever you sacrifice any permanent, target opponent loses a life and you gain a life. I knew you'd want me to live, bestie! I do love the story this card tells, where our egocentric friend here just sacrifices everyone around her to ensure her own survival. Good trope, well represented. Sacrificing permanents to ping opponents. It continues to be a powerful effect. We've seen it in red-black. I don't know if we've seen it in mono-black before. 2 and a black and sacrifice. 2 and a black. 1 and a black plus sacrifice is quite expensive for a sacrifice effect. So I don't know how often you're going to be pulling that off. But just playing her, sacrificing a pile of treasures for other things could be a lot of value in if you're playing aristocrat-style strategies. What a jerk. Resurrected Cultist. 2 and a black for a 4/1 human cleric. Delirium for 2 black. Return Resurrected Cultist from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter, only if there are 4 or more card types in your graveyard, and only as a sorcerer. So, 3 mana 4/1 that comes back as a 4 mana 4/1. It's fine. I'd hardly call it exciting, but it can hit a couple of times. I don't know. This does not excite me as a card. if you can make this work in like, the finality counter makes it a very safe card, and I'm quite disappointed about that. I don't know that, like, I guess it fits for the horror trope of he's resurrected only once, he's not an endless source of undeath. Okay, sure, the finality works flavorfully. He's a cleric, that might matter, but all in all, not a very powerful card. Spectral Snatcher. 4 black for a 6/5 spirit. Ward, discard a card, swamp cycling 2. It's the mono black land cycler. This is a more interesting reanimation target than some of the others. A 6/5 that costs your opponents 2 cards to kill is quite reasonable, and you can easily get it into your graveyard. Still not incredibly exciting or powerful, but much more interesting than some of the other ones in the cycle. Sporogenic Infection. 1 and a black enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When Sporogenic Infection enters, target player sacrifices a creature other than enchanted creature. When enchanted creature is dealt damage, destroy it. So, you play this on your opponent's small thing, and then they have to sacrifice a bigger thing, and then if you ever touch the smaller thing, that will also die. It's a very slow 2-for-1, but it is a 2-for-1. And if you can rebuy it, the permanent, you can repeat that. But making your opponent, being able to go, you have to sacrifice something, no, not that thing, has the potential to be very effective on certain board states. Unholy Annex. 2 and a black. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. If you control a demon, each opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life, otherwise you lose 2 life. Ritual Chamber. 3 black. When you unlock this door, make a 6/6 demon with flying. So, 3 mana for a steady card draw engine at 2 life a turn. More painful than Phyrexian Arena, but less prohibitive to cast than Phyrexian Arena. And then later on, you can pump out a 5 mana 6/6, very reasonable, and it turns your life loss into life gain, which is also very nice. Interesting card. In Commander especially, where you've got life to burn, this is very good. Each opponent is losing the life, which is very satisfying. Very reasonable include in any mid-range grindy deck that includes black. Great card in any demon-based decks. Expect to see this quite a lot. I think this is going to be an underappreciated and overperforming card. The Unstoppable Slasher. 2 and a black for a zombie assassin. It's a 2/3 with Death Touch. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they lose half their life rounded up. And when it dies, if it had no counters on it, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with 2 stun counters on it. So, you attack. If they don't block, they get chunked for a huge amount of life. If they do block, they lose whatever blocked it, and you just keep going. Or if they kill it, it comes back. It takes a bit of time to get its head on straight and recover, and then it goes back to slashing away at your opponent's life total. Irritating to deal with, just exile it if you can. Have a legion of 1/1s to chump it with. Hope your opponent can't give it evasion. Quite nice that it is very resistant to board wipes, so you can play this, board wipe, get rid of everything your opponents are going to block it with, and then it just comes back to start picking up its deadly procession once again. Valgavoth's Faithful. A single black for a 1/1 human cleric. 4 black, sacrifice it. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield only as a sorcery. That 4 mana reanimate is pretty good. Being an activated ability, so you can that doesn't have a tap cost in it, is very nice. Only as a sorcery is a pretty significant downside because you can't do things like chump block with this and then sacrifice in response. But if you're playing a reanimation deck and you want to make sure you have a preponderance of creatures, this is a quite reasonable include. That's the one good thing about these cultists. Sometimes they do your work for you. And finally, not quite finally, but we have found him at last. Valgavoth Terror Eater. The big bad of the story. Lord of Duskmourn. Devourer of Fears. 6 black. This is a 9 mana, 9/9 legendary elder demon. With flying and lifelink and ward, sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. If a card you didn't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with Valgavoth. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than pay its mana cost. So, if you can get rid of your opponent's things, you can then play them using your life as a resource. He's a 9/9 flying lifelink, so you can get that life back using him. And if your opponent wants to get rid of him, they have to throw away a lot of value. The downside, it's a 9 mana spell. It's going to be a bit of a hassle to cast, but yeah, it's a big scary demon boy. Fear his moppy ways. If you're playing it in the 99 and can just cheat it out, enjoy your opponent's bread. Beware if your opponents are on token strategies, that's probably the one who's going to be best equipped to get rid of you. Because 3 non-land permanents is much easier if they've just got a pile of rabbits lying around that they weren't using. Please note that Valgavoth needs to be in play in order for you to cast the card exiled with him, and if Valgavoth goes away and comes back, the exiled card, he won't see any of the cards previously exiled, so you'll have to start with a whole new load of card accumulation. That everything? That seems like everything. Big, scary, definitely worthy of the title of Mythic. Probably not going to see a huge amount of play just because 9 mana is a lot, and while the effects are interesting, they are a bit complicated to make work. Vile Mutilator. 5 black for a 6/5 demon. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or enchantment. It has flying and trample, and when it enters, each opponent sacrifices a non-token enchantment, then sacrifices a non-token creature. So, you pay a creature or enchantment to get a 6/5 flying trample, and then your opponent sacrifice an enchantment and a creature, and those can't be tokens. That is a very powerful ETB effect. I am probably going to run this in my reanimation decks, because if you can get this to enter a couple of times, or cheat it in so that you're not casting it, you're going to very quickly eat up a lot of things on the board. Going to be very effective against things like Oblivion Rings and Pacifisms, because your opponents will very quickly run out of those, and anything of yours that they've locked away, you're going to get back. And still the black cards continue. I need to breathe. Winter's Intervention. 1 and a black instant, 2 damage to target creature, you gain 2 life. It's fine, not exciting, but if you've got life gain synergies, it's not the most horrendous thing. Can we trust him? Nico whispered as they eyed the stranger. I don't know, the Wanderer replied, but he's a lot friendlier than the creature that was chasing us. I have read the story. I am going to say nothing about Winter's reliability or lack thereof. If you want to know, read it yourself. Withering Torment. 2 and a black instant. Destroy target creature or enchantment, you lose 2 life. This is a good upgrade over Murder. We see some more of Wizards exploring black destroying enchantment effects. I stand by this is a reasonable inclusion to the colour pie. I posted about this on Twitter ages ago. If you desperately want to see an exploration of my breakdown of why enchantment removal needed another colour to be able to do it, and why it made sense for black to be that colour. Each spindle is the lingering consciousness of a survivor consumed by Celestorm, a ragged drifting remnant pulsing with constant psychic agony. Creepy. Good removal spell, definitely run it. On to red. I am going to take a couple-minute break, grab a drink, breathe a bit, rest my legs for a moment, and then I'll come back and we'll get on with red. See you soon. Okay. Oh my god. Let's go back to this. On we go. Red cards. Bedhead Beastie. 4 red for a 5/6 with Menace, Mountain Cycling 2. It's the red land cycler. It's fine. Menace on a 5/6 is a pretty reasonable attacker. 6 mana is kind of expensive for that in Commander. Mountain Cycling helps, but it is not the most exhilarating or interesting card. On we go. It's cute though. This beastie that's hiding its horrendous and unbearable face under a bed, covered in Christmas lights, fairy lights, colour lights, lights of uncertain origin or purpose. Betrayer's Bargain. 1 and a red, instant, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an enchantment or creature, or pay 2. Betrayer's Bargain deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So, 2 mana, sack a creature or enchantment, deal 5, or 4 mana, deal 5. 2 mana, deal 5 is a very good rate. There's a cost attached to it, but it's a very versatile cost. Exiling is very nice. If you're in red-green, this is a very reasonable removal spell to consider including. This is my way out. You'll have to find your own, said Winter to Nico. Boiler Bilge's Ripper. 4 and a red for a 4/4 human assassin. When Boiler Bilge's Ripper enters, you may sacrifice another creature or enchantment. When you do, deal 2 to any target. Dealing 2 on enter to something is fine, but not amazing. Having to sacrifice resources to do it makes it worse. Underwhelming card. Unlike Chainsaw, which I have been excited to put into a deck since the moment I saw it in the very first wave of spoilers, possibly even leaks. Chainsaw, 1 and red for an artifact equipment. When it enters, it deals 3 damage to up to 1 target creature. So, you don't have to do 3, but you can if you want to, so you protect yourself if your opponents have nothing. Whenever 1 or more creatures die, not your creatures, just any creatures, put a rev counter on Chainsaw. Equipped creature gets +X/+0, where X is the number of rev counters on Chainsaw, equipped for 3. That's an expensive equip cost, but it's a weapon that just gets bigger and bigger and more powerful the longer it sits around, and because it gets to do 3 when it enters, it immediately puts something on itself. I have a little mono red Voltron deck. This is going to just get slammed straight in there and start making my Krenko enormous. The Charred Foyer. 3 and a red. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. Very standard effect. We've seen this at 4 mana time and time again. It continues to be a very reasonable source of card advantage in red. Warped Space. 4 red. Only once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast from exile. So, 4 mana, you get to start just having an extra card to access each turn. For an extra 6 mana, now you can cast that spell for free. Or if you've got effects that exile in other ways, you get to cast one of those for free. I am quite excited to slam this into my Steal Your Stuff deck. Definitely going to consider putting it into my Enchantress deck if I convert it into rooms. It takes a lot of mana to get fully activated, but casting a spell for free every turn is worth the investment, and the fact that you get to take your time and split it over 2 turns definitely helps, as does the fact that the Charred Foyer helps you dig to the lands that you need to be able to pay for the Warped Space. Also nice that you can pay for the Warped Space and then on that turn immediately cast something for free if you've hit something good from the Charred Foyer. Powerful magic. Right. Clockwork Percussionist. For a single red, you get a 1/1 monkey toy with haste. When it dies, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. Important to note, this one is next turn. So, you've got some time to consider what you're going to do with it. A 1 mana 1/1 with haste, and upside is fine, but not thrilling. Effectively drawing a card when it dies is quite strong for a 1 mana card. The fact that it's an artifact and a creature means that it has a pile of extra synergies. Monkey and toy do not add a huge amount of value, although I have a friend who plays Kibo who is going to be very excited for this, I think. This is no Ragavan, but it's certainly a pretty decent one-drop. Cursed Recording. 2 red artifact. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a time counter on Cursed Recording. Then, if there are 7 or more time counters on it, remove those counters and it deals 20 damage to you. Tap. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, it lets you play a number of instants or sorceries, and it lets you copy one of them a turn. But if you try and do it too many times, it is going to punch you in the face hard. If you have a cunning way to redirect that damage, then you can just keep making value out of it. If you can donate it to an opponent once you've got 6 counters on it, then you can get a lot of value out of it. It is a strange card. At first, I was very excited, and then I read the 20 damage and went, maybe not what I'm looking for in my Spellslinger deck. 'Tis a strange and interesting one. If I was more into horror, I would probably understand the reference it's making, but I don't, so I just have to take it on what's written on the card, and the copying instants and sorceries, very powerful. Hitting yourself for 20 after you've cast 7 instants and sorceries, powerfully bad. If you come up with something good to do with it, go for it. I wish you all the best. Diversion Specialist. 3 and a red for a 4/3 with Menace. Reasonable. 1 mana. Sacrifice another creature or enchantment. Exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. So, 4 mana 4/3 Menace. Reasonable attacker. Not the most amazing, but certainly not horrible. And 1 mana, sacrifice a creature or enchantment that isn't being of use to you, and flip a card off the top to see if that is. Reasonable attacker, reasonable card advantage engine. Definitely worth considering in a number of places if you're looking for a budget option for either of those things. Enduring Courage. 2 red for a 3/3 Dog Glimmer enchantment. Whenever another creature you control enters, it gets +2/+0 and haste until end of turn. And when it dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an enchantment and not a creature. It has been a long time since Ogre Battle Driver. But we now have Ogre Battle Driver that the first time it dies just comes back. If you're playing with a lot of small things, this is a good card to consider. If you're playing with a lot of cards that want to make sure they get attacks in, this is a good card to consider. If you're already playing Ogre Battle Driver, you definitely want this. If you're not playing Ogre Battle Driver, hey, now you know there are 2 cards with this effect. Enjoy yourself. Fear of Being Hunted. 1 red. It's a 4/2 enchantment creature nightmare. It has haste and must be blocked. So, if your opponents don't have medium-sized creatures, this is quite a useful card. If they've got a pile of 1/1s, then you get to eat several. If they've got a pile of 4/4s, you get to eat one. A 3 mana 4/2 haste is fine. The must be booked Fable is more likely to be a downside than an upside. If you've got a way to take advantage of it, then go for it. If you're not sure how to take advantage of that, then there's not much that can be done. Fear of Burning Alive. 4 red for a 4/4 enchantment nightmare. When it enters, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. And Delirium. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Fear of Burning Alive deals that amount of damage to target creature that player controls. So, when it enters, deal 4 to each opponent. If you have Delirium, you deal 4 to each opponent and 4 to a creature each opponent controls. And whenever you do non-combat damage to an opponent, you get to repeat that. Going to be very powerful in things like Perforos, probably in things like Torbran. Very strong if you can recur it, blink it, reanimate it, repeat it. Very strong with damage multipliers. This card does a lot, especially if you can reliably have Delirium when you play it. Be afraid of this card. Don't let its uncommon status or middling stats fool you. This is a dangerous threat. FOMO. 1 and a red for a 2/3 nightmare creature. When Fear of Missing Out enters, discard a card, then draw a card. And if you have Delirium, when it attacks for the first time each turn, untap target creature. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So, you get to Rummage, that's discard, then draw, and you get to pick up an extra combat, but only untapping 1 creature. For a 2 mana 2/3, that's an incredible amount of value. Going to be asking for quite a few different things, but the discard then draw does help you get towards the Delirium you're looking for. And there are lots of ways to abuse even having 1 creature getting an additional attack step. Might need to consider this for the aforementioned Krenko Voltron. I'll need to look at how easily I can get to Delirium, but getting to attack twice is worth a lot. And this is cheap enough to make that potentially viable. Onwards. That one. Glassworks. 2 and a red. When you unlock this door, 4 damage to target creature and opponent controls. Shattered Yard. 4 and a red. At the beginning of your end step, this room deals 1 damage to each opponent. So, 3 mana, 4 damage to a creature. 5 mana, it's a very slow Punisher effect. Not horrible, but not particularly exciting either. If you've got a lot of damage multipliers or other stacking Punisher effects, this is probably worth considering. 3 mana to do 4 damage is slightly overcosted. 5 mana to do 1 is certainly. You need to be in a very specific deck to make this work, but in the right deck, this can add up quite a lot of damage. Grab the Prize. 1 and a red sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. Draw 2 cards. If the discarded card wasn't a land, deal 2 damage to each opponent. The 2 damage is a new wrinkle on the discard draw 2 with upside. I don't think it's a very good upside, and sorcery speed is a huge downside. I would not recommend this. I would stick to the Tormenting Voices and Sazalak's Treacheries. The instant speed ones. Just stick with the instants. Unfortunately, the keyhole turned out to be located in an even larger, scarier clown mouth. Hand that feeds. 1 and a red for a 2/2 mutant. It has Delirium. Whenever it attacks, while there are 4 or more card types, in your graveyard, it gets +2/+0 and Menace. So, It's a 2-mana 2/2 that can attack as a 4-mana 2 menace. No, what? It's a 2-mana 2/2 that can attack as a 4/2 with menace. I don't know that that payoff is worth the effort, but this is a creepy card, and if you want to throw some body horror at your opponents, don't count the fingers. In the darkness, Lana reached for Shay's hand and squeezed it for comfort. Then she heard Shay call her from the room next door. Have you not counted the fingers yet? On we go. Impossible Inferno. 4 and a red instant, 6 damage to target creature. If you have Delirium, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. A 5-mana instant that deals 6 is unexciting. If you can reliably get Delirium with this though, a 5-mana deal 6 draw a card is somewhat more reasonable. How dare you? Clearly AI generated. I assume you're talking about Mr. Fingers over here. Wizards have been very clear that they will not accept AI generated artwork, so I don't know what you're talking about. Humans can also draw the wrong number of fingers on a hand. Have you not looked at any 3-year-old's drawing? I am aware that it was a joke. I was playing into it. Infernal Phantom. 3 and a red for a 2/3 spirit with Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters and whenever you fully unlock a room, gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So, 4 mana 2/3, not exciting. But if you can play a pile of enchantments in one turn, make it into a 6/3 or an 8/3, and then attack with it, your opponent then has difficult choices about whether or not they block. If you can reliably get multiple triggers every turn, this is quite a valuable attacker in an enchantment-based deck. If you can't, this is probably too clunky. Or if you've got a deck where you can just ignore the enchantment effect and all you care about is using other effects to make your creatures enormous and sacrificing them, and you just want an abundance of these when it dies deal damage equal to its power effects. Because we've got quite a lot of them now. Look at this little guy. Look at that grin. Irreverent Gremlin. 1 and a red for a 2/2 Gremlin with Menace. Whenever another creature you control with power 2 or less enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Do this only once each turn. A 2-mana 2/2 Menace with regular card filtering is an interesting thing for red to have access to, and only once a turn is a powerful safety valve, but it's certainly something to consider if you regularly want to just rip through your deck and have a lot of small bodies. Good with something like Locust God, where every time you draw a card you get a small dude, because then you can just, that's the sort of place where the only once each turn matters a lot. Leyline of Resonance. 2 red for an enchantment. If it's in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single creature you control, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. I've seen people muttering about turn 2 kills in standard, and with this, this is the sort of thing that you put in your feather decks. Just, if you're playing a lot of pump spells, single target spells, if you are particularly, Zada is another good place to talk about this. If you are consistently wanting to do things to your own creatures, this helps you do that more. The most valuable player. Sorry, most valuable slayer. 3 and a red for a 2/4. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and first strike until end of turn. First strike is worse than indestructible, which we saw in white, but still does help. This is a card to help you get your survivors through. First strike is fine, but not thrilling for that effect. He can affect himself. That's an important difference to the ones we've talked about already. He can just attack as a 3/4 first strike himself, which is still pretty underwhelming. Forain had never lost a match in his life, and he didn't plan to start now. Nothing particularly thrilling to say about this card. Let's move on. Norin, Swift Survivalist. He's a single red for a 2/1 legendary human coward who cannot block, and whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may exile it, and you may play that card from exile this turn. So, you attack in. Your opponents go blocked here, blocked here, blocked here. Everything that gets blocked, just goes away, and then you can replay it that turn. Make sure you are keeping your mana open. It's an interesting sort of protection for your creatures, but has the downside of puts them into exile instead of the graveyard. Oh, it does say may, so you can plan around that and only exile the ones you've got the mana to recast. Okay. An interesting and strange card, as Norins always have been, and Norins likely always will be. They just make things weird. I don't know what it was. Why would I stick around to find out? Oh no. Overlord of the Boiler Builders. 4 red for a 5/5 Avatar Horror enchantment creature. Impending 4 for 2 red. When it enters or attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target. Hello, Sun Titan. It's good to see you again. Not Sun Titan, Inferno Titan. How are you enjoying your power creep up to 4 damage? 4 mana to do 4 damage to something isn't the most exciting, but 6 mana to do that repeatedly is quite reasonable. Lack of protection or evasion is worth noting, but you do get to do a chunk of damage to something that you would consider a threatening blocker to make your opponent's life more difficult if you're not just killing something or hitting them in the face. Fascinating art as well. Feels somewhat Ghibli in some ways. Feels very Howls or Spirited Away. Painter's Studio. It's a 2 and a red for an enchantment room. When you unlock this door, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them until the end of your next turn. And Defaced Gallery, 1 and a red. Whenever you attack, attacking creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Another room where there isn't much synergy or coherence between the two sides, but red getting 3 mana draw 2 is fine, and 2 mana for an Anthem effect is fine. Neither are very exciting by themselves, but just dropping this on turn 2 and then playing out a board, swinging with a bit of extra value, and then later in the game when you need more cards, activating the Painter Studio to exile a couple is certainly viable. I need to go faster in the talking to get through this before it shuts down. Piggy Bank. 1 and a red for an artifact creature Boar Toy. It's a 3/2, and when it dies, create a treasure. A 2 mana 3/2 is pretty reasonable. It being an artifact as well as a creature, give you some space for shenanigans with artifact things. Boars and toys are not really creature types that have any great synergy to them, but when it does make a treasure token, means that your opponents at least have to make some choices about whether or not they block and how they do that. Or whether or not they attack. A 3/2 makes a pretty decent blocker for quite a long time after turn 2. And this art is just extraordinarily creepy.
Remember when you smacked me for a little pocket honey?
Why does it have 5 eyes? I don't mind the giant mouth in the stomach. I don't mind the random cracks all over it. But why so many eyes? Also on the tail. Why are there eyes on the tail? Pyroclasm. Long time no see. 1 red sorcery, 2 damage to each creature. In my younger days, I would meticulously catalogue all the terrors I encountered. These days, I mostly just kill them with fire. There's Rip, the Spawn Hunter. If you're in the market for playing a slower game and you just want to wipe out all of the random mana dorks and midgets your opponents have dropped, Pyroclasm remains a reasonable spell to join the more expensive 3 and 4 mana versions that do similar things at higher power. Welcome back, it's been a while. Fancy art. Ragged Playmate. 1 and a red for a 2/2 artifact creature toy. 1 tap, target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. You tried to throw me away, Henry. I don't like that at all. We have seen this effect without the mana cost before, so unless you desperately care about it being an artifact, this is probably not worth playing if you're looking for it. Play one of... is it Goblin Tunneler? Goblin Tunneler. Admittedly, this is a... Ragged Playmate is a 2/2 instead of a 1/1, but if what you're looking for is just the unblockable effect, Ragged Playmate costing mana is a pretty significant downside. Like I said, if it being an artifact matters, then go for it. I don't remember if we've had that effect on an artifact creature before, but generally, the mana cost I think will be more of a downside than artifact will be an upside. Rampaging Soul Rager. 2 and a red for a 1/4 spirit. Rampaging Soul Rager gets +3/+0 as long as there are 2 or more unlocked doors among rooms you control. This is underwhelming, even if you're in the doors deck. The most you get out of this is a 3 mana 4/4. That is just not thrilling in Commander. If it was getting bonus for each unlocked door, maybe we could talk, but this is not it. The souls of those who perished before Valgavoth's ascension exist now only as fractured echoes of who they once were. Razorkin Horde Cooler. 4 and a red for a 4/4 human clown berserker. It has haste, and whenever you attack, make a 1/1 red gremlin creature token. Doesn't have to be this that attacks, just anything. That makes it more impressive. It does get to immediately attack itself, and a 4/4 haste is certainly something your opponents need to respect. Churning out 1/1s at every combat is quite useful, but they are not the most impressive creatures. Not a pretty decent version of this effect, but certainly not the best we have seen. On to versions... Bleh. Talking of things we've seen had this effect before, but not seen it like this, Razorkin Needlehead is red for a 2/2 human assassin, has first strike during your turn, and whenever an opponent draws a card, Razorkin Needlehead deals 1 damage to them. This is no Orcish Bowmasters, but it does trigger off of their first draw, not just everything after the first. Wait. Bowmasters Now I need to check what Orcish Bowmaster does. Orcish Bowmaster. Enter their field, and whenever an opponent draws a card, except the first one they drew in each of their draw sets. Okay, that was what I was saying. Cool. So this one will trigger off every card they draw, and is mono red, and is a 2/2 first strike, which attacks pretty reasonably, especially early in the game. It's just another Punisher card. If you enjoy mono red Punisher or red X Punisher, this is a nice include for you. If your opponent is playing Nekusar, be afraid if you see this on turn 2, it's going to deal you a lot of damage.
Stitch your eyes, stitch your skin, stitch your mouth into a grin.
Thank you, you creepy, creepy needle face. Rip Chain Razorkin. 3 in a red for a 5/3 human berserker with reach. He throws the big chain into the air. Okay, sure, I get it. 2 in a red, sack a land, draw a card. No. Okay. It's a very late game card draw engine, or a way to sacrifice land if you desperately want to do that. A 4 mana 5/3 reach is pretty respectable. Even in Commander, most flyers do not want to come into that. So you can just sit there behind this, and then if you get flooded, he gives you something to do with all that mana. Not thrilling, but certainly a respectable thing to put onto a battlefield. Scorching Dragonfire. I feel like we have seen this card before. Yes. It is a reprint. Okay, I'm not going mad. If you like the art, go for it. It's a 2 mana instant that deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and if it dies, exile it. 2 mana exiling removal continues to be pretty reasonable. 3 damage isn't enormous, but hitting planeswalkers is quite nice. It's a reprint. If you weren't already running it, hey, remember this card exists. Maybe you should want to consider it. Kaito Ran. Illusion or no, the fire felt hot enough to kill. Screaming Nemesis. 2 in a red for a 3/3 spirit with haste. And whenever Screaming Nemesis is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. If a player is dealt damage this way, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. So, if you're playing a life gain deck, and your opponent has this, you cannot block it unless you have 0 power creatures. You cannot ping it. You cannot bolt it. You need to exile it or destroy it. It's also worth noting that it doesn't have to go to a player. Your opponent can just redirect the damage to something else that needs killing if they don't think an opponent is caring about life gain. This is just a 3 mana 3/3 that's just going to keep attacking because your opponent is unlikely to care whether it gets blocked or not. Would I run this? Probably. Although it doesn't quite fit the theme of my Never Stop Attacking deck because it doesn't directly have an attack trigger. But the effect is certainly strong enough that I might consider breaking the rule for it. She sees the faces of those who wronged her in everyone she encounters. The Roller Crusher Ride. X2 red, legendary enchantment. Delirium. If a source you control could deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, while there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, it deals double that damage instead. When the Roller Crusher Ride enters, it deals X damage to each of up to X target creatures. So, without Delirium, it's 2 in a red, does nothing. 2 in a red plus X you get to do X damage to X targets. So X is 1, you do 1 damage to 1 target. X is 5, you do 5 damage to up to 5 target creatures. If you have Delirium, you are doubling all of that damage plus any other non-combat damage you do at any other point in the game. Interesting, weird. If you have a big mana deck, this can do a lot of damage to a lot of things. If you're looking for more damage multiplication, this is another one, although takes some effort to actually turn it on. Ticket Booth. 2 and a red, when you unlock this door, Manifest Dread. I do not think that Manifest Dread is worth 3 mana. Tunnel of Hate. 4 red, whenever you attack, target attacking creature gains double strike until end of turn. I do not think that effect is worth 6 mana. Do I think that together these cards are worth their overcostedness? Probably not. If you... What's the... you can, for 5 mana, you can get an enchantment that gives every creature you control double strike. Being able to play an extra 3 mana to make a 2/2. I don't think this card is good. I think it is too overcosted, and Tunnel of Hate is too restricted. I'm trying to be optimistic about the rooms, but that one I just don't think is good enough. Trial of Agony. For a single red sorcery, choose 2 target creatures controlled by the same opponent. That player chooses one of those creatures. Trial of Agony deals 5 damage to that creature, and the other creature can't block this turn. So, you want to attack. Your opponent has 2 things that will make attacking difficult. You choose both of them, one of them can't block, and the other takes 5 damage. That may be enough to kill it, that may just weaken it enough that if you attack and they block with it, that thing will now die. Giving your opponent's choices is bad. 1 mana for a somewhat conditional 5 damage removal spell is good. This is a very interesting political card. That's a great 1 mana spell. I think it is too conditional to call it great. You have to have an opponent where either you don't care where 5 damage is a relevant amount to either of your 2 targets, or you desperately want to make sure at least one of them can't block. All it took to shatter their lifelong bond was a scrap of hope. That's quite upsetting. There are going to be times where you play this and it does exactly what you need to and you feel amazing. But there are going to be times where your opponent, where it's just not going to be worth playing. The choices are going to be too easy for your opponent to make, or not relevant, or their things will be big enough that 5 damage doesn't matter, or they have too many things where even shutting off 2 blockers won't do enough. In Limited, and maybe Constructed, this will matter more. But in Commander, I think it is too narrow to be of value. Turn Inside Out. Single red, instant, target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. When it dies, Manifest Dread. This is more reasonable. +3/+0 is an enormous pump. You get to attack, make some really dodgy attacks, and just completely blow it out. And when your thing dies, you get to replace it with a new 2/2, which could be something better than a 2/2. Really creepy art, very powerful pump spell, especially in something like Zada, where you're copying it to every creature, then everything that dies you Manifest Dread for. Just be careful you don't deck yourself if you're doing that. Untimely Malfunction. 1 and a red, instant. Choose one. Destroy target artifact. Change the target spell or ability with a single target. Interesting. An unusual effect. Or 1 or 2 target creatures can't block this turn. No, this worked perfectly in the lab. So, blow something up, or shut down 2 blockers, or redirect something that you don't want pointing at you. 2 mana is borderline, is acceptable. Like, it feels slightly high priced for those effects, but also the amount of flexibility in this means that that's quite worth it. This is a card that you will want to consider, especially if you're especially in an aggressive deck where being able to shut off 2 blockers can matter a lot, but it also gives, or where you desperately want to have additional copies of protection spells or redirection spells. Destroy target artifact will almost always have a reasonable target, but 2 mana is the upper end of what you want to play for just that. So you want to be in a deck where the other 2 modes reliably will matter. At least one of the other 2 modes will matter reliably for you. But definitely a good include in a lot of places. Don't sleep on this card. Vengeful Possession. 2 and a red, sorcery. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it, it gains haste. You may discard a card if you do draw a card. As the ghost clawed its way into her skin, Sarissa forgot that the rage tearing through her heart wasn't her own. So, it's your very standard, your thing's my thing attack with it. Having a rummage stapled onto it is a bit random, but just a nice little bit of trinket text to make sure that you have something to follow up with. If you like threaten effects, this is an upgrade to quite a lot of threaten effects. 3 mana is nice, because we've seen quite a few of these at 4. 3 mana threaten with upside is very nice, but requires a very niche sort of deck. Vicious Clown. 2 and a red for a 2/3 human clown. Whenever another creature you control with power 2 or less enters, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. If it had evasion or trample or anything, this card would be incredible. As it is, it's very easily chump blocked, but also very easily made enormous. Like, think of any of the sort of red including token decks where you can very easily churn out 5 or 6 1/1s, giving this +10, +12, +20. If you're playing this somewhere where you can give it trample, flying, evasion, unblockable, this is a great card. If you can't, it's probably still worth considering just to force your opponent to block, but 3 toughness is very vulnerable. Violent Urge. Single red mana instant, target creature gets +1/+0 on first strike, and if you have Delirium, it gets a double strike. 1 mana for +1/+0 and double strike is enormous. Yes, you have to make sure you have Delirium. Yes, that can be some work, but instant speed double strike is an enormous blowout in combat if you've built your deck to make it work. And honestly, +1/+0 on first strike is hardly a terrible backup plan if you can't get the double strike. But +1/+0 on first strike will win a lot of combats. Double strike will win a lot of games. Waltz of Rage. 3 red for a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control dies, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. The melody was all in her head, but she'd always preferred to dance alone. Right, you pick maybe your biggest creature, maybe just something that will kill only the things you want to. It's a 5-mana mono red board wipe that gives you a pile of cards to play with to replace everything that you lost in the process, and leaves your best creature around to then go attacking with. In the right deck, if you're playing a deck with red and big creatures, this is an excellent thing to consider including. Commentary-wise, you might want to consider this in something like Omnath, where you target Omnath, you deal 5 damage to everything. All of your elementals die, you get a whole pile of triggers and a whole pile of extra cards to do stuff with. Oh, we made it to the end of red. I am tired. Nearly 2.5 hours, 7 1/3 kilometers. Whew. Right, pick this up on Friday and we'll get through green and as much of the rest as we can. I will see you all then. Have a good one.